Ah! Wow!
Very.
If
to
that
see you.
doesn't get your feet moving and your heart pumping, then there's something wrong with you. Okay, welcome to good looking, amazing people all over the world. Remember, you're good looking because you're always looking for and finding the good. You've tuned in consciously and conscientiously to Hug America podcast with your America's greatest storyteller, amazing Neal Foard. That's Ford with an A.
Hello there.
And the ambassador of joy, Barry Shore. That's Shore with S-H-O-R-E. And we're going to regale you with stories that penetrate, that cause you to laugh, maybe even cry, but certainly give you inspiration, aspiration, and the most important of all, transformation. So what I'd like to do is ask Neal if he would just do a 126-second hello about him, pass it back to me. I'll do another 124 seconds and then give you a story about the T word, and then we'll just riff and have a lot of fun. So take it away, wonderful Neal. 126 seconds about you.
Well, thank you, Barry. I come from the world of advertising, and you might say that I'm trying to make up for my sins in that career. The word that the Latin world uses to describe advertising is propaganda. And I think that it's an apt use of the word. Somebody pays you in order to spout a message a certain way, in order to achieve a certain attitude towards that brand, service, or person. And I spent 25, 30 years doing that. And from that experience, cultivated a long list of small techniques for storytelling. And that's why Barry refers to me as the America's greatest storyteller, because Lord knows I've done more than 10,000 of them. And I guess that fulfills my time quota.
You've got it, baby. Now I want to just mention two words that he used, a P and a C. Propaganda, which actually we might do a whole show on propaganda, because I am a big fan of propaganda. But that's another story. You'll understand when we do a whole show about it. And I love the word that you use, cultivated. Notice he didn't just say, he did something. He cultivated, because that's who he is. He's a cultivating man. He's a cultured man, and he creates gardens of delight. By the way, that's an acronym for God. Garden of Delight. Ooh, I thought you'd like that. I see, I got his attention. Barry Shore, the ambassador of joy. And this is called Hug America Podcast. And we do it purposely because, as you know, Hug America Podcast, HAP, those are the first three letters of the word happy, which people love being. Happy, of course, stands for Hug America Podcast, promoting youth. HAPPY. So I'm going to begin with a story that's about the T word. Now, the T word for us is transformation. That's really what people want. They think they want inspiration, but we all know that inspiration gets you up and around, and then a couple days later, it's okay, you're back in routine. And people think that they want information. Well, they really don't. There's so much information, especially on the web, and you already have all the information you need to be successful in life. Sometimes you just don't realize it. It's uncovering, sometimes by ripping off a bandage, or just peeling back a layer of life. That's what we're going to do right now. We're going to peel back a layer of life, and what I call my T story. And the T story revolves around something that I enjoy doing because it challenges me. I grew up with a fear of heights. Now, it's not unusual. I think a lot of people have some inborn fear of heights. Most people don't jump out of planes in a parachute or skydive and such like that. It's a very small number of people. Now, most people don't get nervous going up in an airplane, but a very small percentage of people do. But when you're in a big 747, it doesn't really matter. You don't even think about it. But how about if you go up in something, a small plane, a single engine, really a single engine in the front of the plane, or even better, what we call in our world a glider. Now, I don't mean a hang glider. I mean a glider, which is really a plane, Plane, not Plain, a Plane, which looks exactly like any other plane, except it's missing two interesting components. One is an engine, and the other is a propeller. So wait a minute, how do you get off the ground and go up high and do something which is to be sail? It's really called a sailplane, sail like a bird. Now, birds, everybody knows, uses their wings to move from one place to another. But the great birds, like the eagles and the falcons and the hawks, they just spread their wings and they glide on something called thermals. Now, everybody knows what a thermal is, I think, but if you don't, I'll just tell you. Thermal means hot air. And not just Barry Shore, but thermal. And is of by definition, if there are patches called hot air, there will also be a corresponding patch called cold air. And in hot air, we tend to rise up when you have your wings spread. In cold air, you tend to fall. So the genius of life is to be able to be up in a sailplane that, remember, has no engine and has no propeller, and to be able to sail like a bird, much like a surfer does on the ocean, but you learn how to look at the winds as if they're waves, because that's what they are. And you can literally ride the thermals for not only tens of miles or hundreds of miles, but great people, and I knew one of them fairly well, for thousands of miles. But let me tell you the story. So as I said, I had a fear of heights. And I wanted to go up in one of these small planes, in this case, a sailplane, because I was nervous and I wanted to overcome it. So I went up a number of times in one of these planes. And basically what you don't go up by yourself because you can't. You have to have an instructor or a pilot with you. And in this case, just like Neal, you look at him, he is my co-pilot. So imagine him sitting behind me and I'm sitting in the front of the sailplane. In order to get aloft, what has to happen is that there's a tow plane that's going to pull this thing made out of very light wood, by the way, balsam wood, things like that. Very large wingspan, about 60 feet, 30 feet on either side, and a very small cockpit with just a joystick and some levers that just move flaps. That's all they do, because you have no engine, you have no what do you call it, rotor, right? No rotary blade. And the small plane is going to pull you up, tow you up to approximately somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 feet. I did this in a place called Pear Blossom. Now, for any of you who don't know, because people all over the world, so go and just do a quick Google after the show and look up Pear Blossom, California. It's exactly what you might think. It is a place in the desert. Very few people live there. Maybe actually today more people live there, but suffice to say, it's high desert in California, surrounded by these majestic mountains in the 10,000 foot range. So it's a perfect place for sailplanes. And there's a great airport there just for sailplanes, for gliders. It's one of the best in the country, interestingly enough. So I'm going with some friends, and I now get in the plane. I get in the front seat, and my wonderful co-pilot behind me, looks like he came out of Central Casting, Neal. He has these dark lines, desert rat type of guy, right? Mm-hmm. And he knows how to fly these sailplanes. And he gets saying to me in a very few words, like, hello. He told me his name only because I asked. So he gets in the back, I get in the front, he pulls the canopy over us, and he gives a thumbs up to the pilot in the plane that has about 100, 150 foot cord. All of a sudden we get a little tug. Woo! All of a sudden we're up in the air. You're going on the ground, by the way. There's wheels that are all of about 10 inches around. They're scraping the ground. That's how you land. Those are the wheels that you're going to come back down on. Not these big giant things. And pretty soon we're aloft, and we get up 500 feet. I'm looking down. I'm very nervous because I'm still afraid, a little bit afraid of heights, but I do it to overcome it. And by the time you get up to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000, 8,000 feet, well, you're just looking around and your eyes are open, and you're mesmerized, and you're loving it. The fear melts away. It doesn't go away. It just melts away. So somewhere around 8,000, 8,500 feet, all of a sudden, turbulence, the T word. I mean, we're bouncing around, and we went up to 8,500 because I can read the altimeter, and all of a sudden we're down to 6,000 feet. Ah! You fall 2,500 feet in about 4 seconds. All of a sudden I said, yikes, turbulence. And that at that point, the rope went away and the plane left us. And now I'm alone in this tube with my co-pilot. And I'm saying, my gosh, we're going to have turbulence like this? And here comes the reply. I certainly hope so. How else are you going to fly? Wow. Because what was he teaching me? What did he tell me in those few words? That turbulence was what a surfer does on the plane, on the waves in the ocean. That's what we're going to do now as we move from thermals into cold. That's where the turbulence came in, and ride those waves and go higher and higher like the great eagles. And you get up to a place where all you hear, I'm saying this interesting enough, is almost nothing. You almost hear the wind going past you, but you don't. You're up so high and the canopy is closed. It's not like skydiving. I haven't been skydiving, but I have a friend who tells me, the wind is rushing past you. Hello, because you're falling through the sky at, whatever rate of speed. Here you're up and it's cloudless and the mountains are all around. And you forget that there was turbulence. And now with him and me, and he's telling me what to do. Move this rudder this way, move the stick a little bit back that way. And now I'm maneuvering the plane and I'm trying to understand where we are in thermals versus cold, and not so much to avoid the turbulence, but to ride it, to utilize it. But this was over 30 years ago. Those words never left me. Turbulence? I certainly hope so. How else are you going to fly? I've used that speaking to audiences of many tens of thousands of people. And I have almost every time a collective, So I wanted to share that with you, my dear beloved friend, partner, America's greatest storyteller, and to ask you to give me a response.
The first thing that it makes me think of is the sort of gracefulness of a surfer or a snowboarder or a skier or anybody who is going over rocky terrain. Have you ever seen in the X Games or in motocross competitions in stadiums, you can scarcely believe the way that these guys ride these moto bikes over, ridges. They just have such equanimity. They just flow so gracefully over what would have toppled any of us. And I've always found that quality, that ability to smoothly encounter an environmental barrier, I've always found that quite admirable. The more somebody knows, the more it all seems to slow down. The pilot's familiarity with the fact that the only way you're going to remain aloft is if you're going to be buffeted by winds. If there were no currents, all we would have to rely on is our speed, keeping our wings afloat. But there's something else that it makes me think of, which is, you may have heard a quote similar to, all crises end, and all that you have when it's over is how you behaved during the crisis. And there's a kind of, I love the pilot's attitude. Whatever happens is going to happen, but his attitude is, well, let's just accept it. Let's just be here for it. Oh, is that going to happen again? Well, I sure hope so. I suppose, just think about how fearless an aspect that is. And I don't honestly know what you perhaps can chime in on this, Barry. We know we have a very good instinct in it, and science is bearing out the idea that even matter itself is nothing more than vibrating energy. It vibrates at a very, very specific frequency. And that the reason anything appears solid to us when we touch a table or a coffee cup or somebody's skin, the only reason it appears solid to us is that the magnetic impulses resist one another, that it's just vibrating energy that is repelling at a certain frequency. Therefore, all of life, all of matter, all of existence is vibrations of energy. Now consider the attitude of the pilot behind the sailplane. I can't honestly say that his attitude is going to affect the turbulence, but there's something about him just vibrating with calm that I think I don't know. I don't honestly know whether I think you can attribute someone's attitude as changing a physical dynamic, but you have probably encountered more than once thinking about someone and then the phone rings, or having sent someone a letter and then they actually phone you before the letter arrives. That the way that we are in the world affects how the world comes back at us. And understanding that there will be turbulence and accepting it and embracing it and flowing with it, I can't help but think that there's some lesson there. There's something to be absorbed from it.
First of all, thank you so much. I'm going to mention, because we live with words, that's our métier. Love is the acronym for living on vibrating energy, living on the vibrational plane. And you are absolutely correct. It's so fun because there are so many great analogies that we can use in the world. One of them is the idea of a radio. Now, everybody knows radios have two kinds of frequency, primarily. There's something called the AM dial and the FM. So we use AM, FM, but anybody knows what it means. Well, AM stands for amplitude modification, and FM is frequency modulation. So the ability for the human being to understand that we are not that much different. Matter of fact, we are, like you say, the same, is that we work with radio waves. They come through us, around us, and from us. And the ability for us to tune in to a particular frequency and station, and the ability to change that so that people who have what we'll call it, for want of a better term, moods. Somebody's in a mood, you can just make them aware that all they have to do is just shift that dial a little bit and they can change the mood. So if you listen to the upbeat intro in this wonderful podcast, I mean, you can't help but be elevated, animated, upbeat when you hear that, because that's what music can do for you. So the ability for us to amplify and modulate the frequency, as you just said so eloquently, is the genius of the human being, unlike any other creature on earth. Now, we know for a fact that whales have this sound, and dolphins and such. They're a high species. But the reality is that we can communicate with them on that level. We can do what almost no other species in the world, I think no other species in the world can do, which is to transmit our thoughts without articulating it in words and touch somebody any place in the world, like you just said. Have you ever? And everybody shakes their head. Yes, of course. We've all had that happen, right? Well, how does that happen? It's because thoughts have no barrier. There's nothing in the world, zero. There's nothing in the world that can stop. There's no mountain, there's no ocean, there's no building, there's nothing. Now, we know that when it comes to cell phones or internet, we say sometimes, oh, I'm in a difficult cell area. Okay, all right, maybe in 10, 20, 30 years, we won't have those things anymore. But right now, we're the greatest expositors of the reality of what you just talked about. The genius of the human is that we can, with our thoughts and therefore our words and our deeds, project that which everybody in the world really says they want, which is joy, happiness, peace, and love. So I give it back to you, my dear beloved friend.
Cheer up, Barry. There is a concept called quantum entanglement, in which the thinking goes, forgive me if I mangle this, but I believe I'm getting it right. Quantum entanglement means there are two particles and or two frequencies of vibrating energy sufficient that they take on a kind of physical mass, and they can be at opposite ends of the world and affect one another, even though they don't have any physical contact. And you can do this, apparently, you can do this at tremendous distances, more than 10,000 miles. You can, in principle, you can have something on the Voyager spacecraft, and if it's quantumly entangled with an atom on Earth, then to heat or cool the atom on Earth, it will affect the quantumly entangled particle at the other end of this spectrum. Okay, if we accept the truth of that, and I have no reason to doubt it, then what it is a symptom of is our ability to affect things that we have no physical contact with. Now, if that is so, if we were able to harness this, I mean, we have this suspicion that there may be some truth to the idea that if just by thinking about someone, if somehow there is sufficient power to the thought, the intention, and so forth, that it results in a reaction from the other person, the person you're thinking about. If there's truth to this, and somehow we learned how to develop that skill, I wonder what the outcome of this will be. No doubt somebody will try to monetize it, but imagine what might occur if you were able to send someone, your good vibes, or just let them know you're thinking about them. I think there's nothing sadder than feeling alone. And imagine if you could reassure someone that they're not. I had a young guy reach out to me by email. He'd seen one of my TikTok videos, and he got a wild hair to just contact me because he was feeling, he'd broken up with his girlfriend. She dumped him. He was having difficulty getting this product off the ground that he was working on. And he just felt such sort of solitude and loneliness that he reached out to a stranger to just say hi. So I sent him a very long email response. And I thought to myself, oh, dude, that's so sad that you feel like, that you don't have anybody nearby that you can, that can reassure you that you're not in this fight all by yourself. And nevertheless, I took it, the way I interpreted it is I just pretended for a moment that the guy was standing right next to me. If he was standing right next to me, you know how you would react, which is, oh, brother, if I could just tell you one thing, I've been there, man. I've been there. I know what you're feeling. And if you get nothing else from this note from me, just understand you're not alone in this experience, and you're not alone as a human being. Barry, have you ever had the experience of having that sensation of like being a little down in the dumps, or really feeling like you're facing things on your own? And then what you do to fight it is actually not dwell on how alone you are, but rather you try to reach out to improve somebody else's day. And I suspect you've done that a lot.
So this is the area I wanted to mention to you when you talked about this idea of this ability to harness and channel this energy as a skill. So I'll mention to you something. I have my book, my life, my podcast, everything I do and build in business is called The Joy of Living. And it's not called The Joy of Living. It's The Joy of Living. I sum it up in one word. The joy of living is giving. Giving is almost a palindrome. It's just, okay, fine, there's an N in there, but it reads the same backwards and forwards essentially, because that's what giving is about. It is the sharing, and sharing, of course, stands for spreading happiness and rejuvenating energy. There's your energy again. But I want to mention something that you pointed out, and I think it's vital to talk about it. It's a skill. In other words, just like one can become a muscle-bound being, and I don't mean have to be Olympic style, you don't have to be Arnold, but to be physically fit. That's a skill. As opposed to just sitting and eating Cheetos and watching, something and vegetating. That's a different skill. That's a skill called being dormant. The other skill is becoming vibrant. They're the same idea, just opposite ends, right? Dormant versus vibrant. So if it's a skill, we can learn it. And here's where it gets really fun. ESP. So some people, if I say ESP, they think they know what it means. Extrasensory perception. In other words, there is perception. There is sensory perception, as you mentioned about touch. And by the way, you can practice this with somebody you love. I've done this with large audiences, by the way, over 2,000 people at a time. You have people touch each other with a finger, and it gets a little electric sometimes. And then you do the same experiment with that person, but keep your fingers about an inch, inch and a half away from each other. And you can still feel the electricity.
Oh, is that so?
It's so wonderful. Yeah, when you do it with somebody you love, do it with your wife. Touch each other's hand, you'll feel a little tingle, and then just about an inch. In other words, they're not touching. They don't have to. And that can be replicated far distances. But the reason I mention is because ESP in my world stands for everyday simple pleasures. The way to formulate the skill of becoming more perceptive on living in a frequency environment is to practice everyday simple pleasures. To be able to walk outside and take a deep breath. I'll even go back one step back, to be able to walk outside, because I couldn't do that for years. To be able to get up out of bed in the morning. Hello. So people can say, what are you talking about, Barry? Well, I won't go into the whole riff now, but I used to be paralyzed. I was a quadriplegic. Look that up. Quadriplegic, completely paralyzed from the neck down. So for me to get up in the morning, put my feet over the side of the bed, voila, c'est miracle. And in the remaining couple of minutes, I just want to point out to you, again, part of my worldview is using this wonderful word that you said, because it does affect and sometimes afflict too many people. They mispronounce the word alone. 99.98% of all people in the world mispronounce and they call it alone. Now, you and I both know that it's really pronounced all one. When you even think like that and internalize it and articulate it and recognize alone, all one. Okay, I am part of the all one.
That's good stuff, Barry. I like that last bit.
Well, to be able to move my partner, America's greatest storyteller, that's big.
It's quite a profound shift to think that, one gets frustrated that more people don't sort of realize how we're all in this together. To sort of end my bit on my first note, which is that I used to be in the propaganda business. They are using propaganda. Propaganda is a tool right now to make you feel unsatisfied and feel alone and feel as though you're isolated, and you anything that you get, you have to take rather than to share. And it kind of makes me heartsick. That's why that change from the word alone to all one means so much to me.
It's a shift. And as you and I both know, title of my latest book, Oh Shift. And as I said many times, 42 years working with people, 97.2% of people drop the F and shift, and the other stuff happens. You're going to be effing careful with your Fs. We want to shift perspective. That's why you've tuned in. These thousands and tens of thousands of people, wonderful Neal, tuned in to Hug America podcast, because they know on this show, we work with the 3 fundamentals of life, which make people happier, healthier, and wealthy. Who doesn't want that? Number 1, your life has purpose. Number 2, as a result of that, you can go MAD. MAD is a wonderful acronym that stands for make a difference, like Neal does with his stories, like Barry Shore tries to do with the joy of living. And the 3rd is to uncover the power and the secrets of everyday words and terms, like we talked about. Happy Hug America podcast promotes youth. And don't read it alone, and read it all one. And we ask you, please share this podcast with 5 people. That's it. You want to share with 50 or 100, it's up to you, but at least 5. And keep inviting your family and friends. So A blessing from wonderful Neal and Barry is go forth, live exuberantly, spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad. Go make a difference.